So our topic for today is about community development through heritage and socio-ecological conservation. And I am glad that I'm invited here in the first Phil Arts webinar series. So I'm going to share the case of Chaya Rice Terraces in Mayuyao, Ifugao. So let me first introduce you the concept of socio-ecological production landscape. Earlier, our dean introduced the concept of Satayama in Japan, and the socio-ecological production landscape is also the general term for Satayama, but it refers to the dynamic mosaics of habitats and land uses that have been shaped over the years by interactions between people and nature in ways that maintain biodiversity and provide humans with goods and services needed for their well-being. So in this figure, you can show an example of Chaya socio-ecological production landscape, or what I am going to call SEPEL in this presentation. In this photo, you can see the landscape of the Chaya rice terraces composed of different components: the village, or what they called Fuglay in Ifugao dialect, the Sweden farm, the Ponhafalan, the private woodlot, or the Pinushu, the rice field, or the Padjao, and the water bodies, or Guangguang in Ifugao dialect. So each component is important in the landscape and interacting with one another to produce goods and services. So the Chaya socio-ecological production landscape refers to the entire Chaya rice terraces system, including the woodlot, the rice terraces, with its irrigation coming from the river and natural spring and the village. So it is also one of the Ifugao rice terraces in Cordillera region, inscribed in UNESCO's World Heritage Site and Globally Important Agricultural Heritage Sites, or GIAS. So as an IRT recognized by the UNESCO, it favors the conservation of culture and its surrounding landscape. So as we all know, all of the Ifugao rice terraces has been a model of grandeur and resilience for almost 2,000 years. And it provides ecosystem services to the people, especially the indigenous people in Ifugao. It provides food and water, regulation of floods, nutrient cycling, and spiritual benefits. But like the other socio-ecological production landscape in the world, the Chaya SEPEL has many challenges. So it includes here the giant earthworm, which caused destruction of stone walls and decrease in rice yield, migration, which resulted to the loss of manpower, and climate change disturbances, decrease in yield, occurrence of pests and diseases, landslide, typhoon, and warming temperature. And lastly, modernization, which causes loss of traditional knowledge and loss of biodiversity. So these challenges are endangering the productivity and sustainability of the Chaya rice terraces. So I'm going to introduce you the concept of resilience, for it is essential for its conservation and conservation. And when we enhance the resilience of a SEPEL, it is the key for long-term sustainable production system and also for securing ecosystem services. Let me further define what is resilience. According to Adger 2006 and 2007, it is a concept which is desirable for facilitating the sustainability of natural resources and ecosystem services and ensure a stable environment for human life and well-being. Another definition from Walker et al. 2004, it is the capacity of a system to absorb disturbance and reorganize while undergoing change as to still retain essentially the same function, structure, identity, and feedbacks. So it has three major components: the resilience, for to be able to restore and conserve a system. When we say that a socio-ecological system is resilient, it has the amount of disturbance a system can absorb and still remain within the same state or domain of attraction. It is capable of self-organization, and it has the ability to learn and adapt, according to Carpenter et al. 2001. So here is a model or a conceptual framework about the socio-ecological system in the Chai rice terraces. We can see here that there are two systems. The first one is the social system, includes the farmers, the individuals, and institutions. And it provides management or adaptation to the ecological system, which includes the rice terraces and the woodlot. So the ecological system provides ecosystem services to the social system. So what are the ecosystem services being provided by the ecological system? Like what I've said earlier, it includes provisioning of food, aesthetics, and other cultural services or regulating function. But this socio-ecological system is affected by disturbances like extreme weather conditions and socio-cultural changes. So I've mentioned that the system is experiencing loss of traditional knowledge, the existence of pests and diseases, and other adversities. So it is important to enhance the resilience of the socio-ecological system so they could be able to sustain the services that it provides. So when the system is resilient, it has the buffer capacity, self-organization, and capacity for learning. And here we can include to enhance the resilience, it has to have community development strategies. So for community development, it can be considered as a process of engagement, empowerment, and action that fosters community resilience, and it helps the system to have adaptive capacity and equity. So in resilience assessments, it is very important because it helps in the preservation and conservation of our cultural heritage site. So what system state is being considered, resilience of what? Here we are considering the whole Chai rice terraces and what perturbations are of interest. It pertains to the challenges that I've mentioned. And lastly, it is important to identify the determinants of resilience so that we can know the important parameters to be measured so that we can identify the possible solutions to improve the resilience of the system. Excuse me. Okay po, sorry po. So to further continue my presentation, the study that I'm sharing with you is the first objective of my thesis. It's just a part of my thesis in Ifugao. So I identify the determinants of the socio-ecological resilience of the Chaya so that we can have parameters or indicators for the resilience building strategies of the landscape. So this is the study area. The Barangay Chaya is the home of the Chaya rice terraces. So it is located in the Cordillera Administrative Region. So the methods for this study is qualitative research design, and in total, I had focus group discussions with 6 groups: the Municipal Local Government Unit, the Barangay Local Government Unit of Chaya, the Farmers Group, youth sector, and organizations composed of members from people's organization, non-government organization, and religious organizations. So all in all, we had participants, 31 participants from the different sectors, and all of the discussions were recorded and transcripts were entered to QSR NV Boten trial version, and thematically analyzed following the guidelines of Brown and Clark 2006. So the themes were categorized using the two dimensions of socio-ecological production landscape, namely socio-cultural and ecological dimension. So I'm sharing with you the steps in conducting thematic analysis by Brown and Clark. So the first step that I did in the thematic analysis is the familiarization with the data, the initial coding, generating themes, checking for validity and reliability, defining and naming themes, and lastly, the interpretation and producing the report. So for the results, based on the thematic analysis and the result of the focus group discussion, resilience and Chaya rice terraces has 5 major themes: farming practice, cultural tradition, biodiversity, family income, and social networks. So for the determinants, under the social-cultural dimension, the first one is the farming practice, which has 6 major indicators, namely maintaining woodlot or pinutru, preservation of stone walls, agricultural biodiversification, preference for subsistence farming, preference for organic farming, and the practice of traditional farm labor, which is called Fu, Mebefto, and Changa. So I would like to discuss it individually. For maintaining woodlot or pinutru, you can see in this slide the pinutru being maintained by our brother in the Chaya. So pinutru or woodlot is what we call in other areas in Ifugao muyong. So it is a system which regulates the maintenance and the communal use of the land. And this is the main reason why the watershed has been preserved. So the pinutru itself provides continuous irrigation or source of water for the whole Chaya rice terraces and other rice terraces in Mayuyao, Ifugao. So next is the preservation of stone walls. So in this photo, you can see the visible stone walls here are still original, and it have made it possible for the terraces to last for a long time. So in other rice terraces in Ifugao, uh, they are made of soil or clay, but in Mayuya, Ifugao, specifically in Chaya, it is made of stone walled. And based on the conversations with the farmers and barangay officials, it is their culture to always maintain the stone walls, and whenever there are damages, especially during typhoon, they immediately repair it if they have the means to restore it. So maintaining the stone walls or repairing the stone walls is very pricey. So some of the farmers, if the stone walls are really damaged, they don't consider to repair it. So that's why there are rice terraces which are being abandoned in some parts of Ifugao. Next is the agricultural biodiversification. So all of the participants in the focus group highlighted the important role of genetic diversity. And in Chaya, they said that there's no problem with hunger, and even during calamity, the people can still survive because there are different sources of locally available food, because they are practicing crop diversification, and they are also planting vegetables aside from rice, and they integrate fish in the paddies. And also, it serves as an alternative to rice during long period of drought. And agricultural biodiversification is one of the resilience building strategies. Next is the preference for subsistence farming. Unlike our farmers in Luzon and other areas in the Philippines, farmers are selling their produce so that they could have a source of income. But in Chaya, all produce they use it solely for home consumption, and they don't buy commercial rice because they think it's more safe, nutritious, because all inputs used are organic, and they help these subsistence farming helps them to be more food sufficient, and they could have buffer until the next cropping. So also in the chai rice terraces, they don't use or practice inorganic farming. They use organic farming where they use the green manure and animal manure as fertilizers for the soil. So this in this photo, you can see the wild sunflower, and they use it as a fertilizer component in the soil during land preparation. And because they use organic farming because they believe that inorganic fertilizers and pesticides will create imbalance in their environment. Another thing that is being important as a resilience building strategies in Chaya is the practice of traditional farm labor. So in Chaya, there is still a strong community relationship, and whenever there are damages that needs to be repaired, especially during typhoon or any kind of disaster, the spirit of community cooperation, or what they call pacham, is always at head. So in Luzon, we call it bayanihan. And also in the farm labor itself, they have this kind of fu, or exchange of free labor, and meebto, when farmers are participating in the harvest, we'd share one or two bundle of rice. And changa, so they are helping in the farmer during land preparation, planting, or harvesting, and they will just have this free meal. And fortunately, it's still being practiced in the locality until the day. So this helps them to become more self-organized and not to become dependent to the government. So next theme is the cultural tradition under the socio-cultural dimension. So there are three indicators. The first is the continuous practice of traditional land inheritance system, or what they call FANO, the transmission of indigenous knowledge and practices, and lastly, the performance of rituals related to farming. So this is FANO. It is a land inheritance system wherein most of the property is transferred to the eldest child to avoid rice field fragmentation. So this FANO system, or primogeniture in other term, it ensures the continuity of rice cultivation. And all the participants in the focus group discussion have high respect to the land. So they don't sell it because selling is strictly forbidden, because they believe that it came from their ancestors and it should be handed down from generation to generation. And it is very important because it has a value, it has a sentimental value. So next is the transmission of indigenous knowledge and practices. So here in the photo is Miss Cleon, as she participated in the focus group discussion. The youth sector during the focus group has a high respect when it comes to their culture and in sustaining the land. So all participants mentioned that the process of stonewalling should be conserved, preserved, and it should be transferred from the parents itself to the children, especially the men or the eldest son. Another important strategy in transmission of indigenous knowledge and practices is the conduct of annual celebration called Ikumtad Ed Majojo. So this is an important event because it shows the rice rituals, ethnic games, song contests, native dance, and there is a parade of barangay residents wearing their native attire. So it's very important because this is a venue wherein the elders can share the indigenous knowledge and practices to the youth or the young people. So here is another thing, the performance of rituals. So they are practicing rituals, especially when there is pest incidents, and honga, or a ritual performed to drive away evil spirits before planting, and kipid, the practice of sexual abstinence before planting. So there is only a few is practicing this kind of rituals because they the the participants told me that there is now a declining number of traditional ritual performers because of the introduction of Christianity in the village. So majority of the indigenous people are now Christianized or Christian, and some are Catholics, and other religion exist in the village. So another theme under the determinants of resilience is social network. They said that it is important to have an institution aiding the community, and access to information is very also important, especially in relation to farming. And another theme is the family income, which include farm income and non-farm income. So the existence of institutions aiding the community. The participants mentioned that the Ifugao Cultural Heritage Office is very essential because it provides resources that are needed for the restoration of damaged terraces. And the ICHO, or the Ifugao Cultural Heritage Office, provides training on stonewalling that capacitates young generation. So it's very important that ICHO is there because it helps them to transfer the indigenous knowledge to the young people. And during calamities, the existence of Municipal Social Welfare Development, or the MSWD, is very important because it provides them relief goods to the families affected by natural calamities. And another thing is the existence of Municipal Agriculture Office because it helps them with extension support and agricultural inputs like seeds, fingerlings, and organic fertilizers. So they gave or provide the support to the farmers. And lastly, the farmers are organized and they are members of the the Farmers Irrigators Association, and they are initiating in the rehabilitation and repair of irrigation canals and stone walls after disasters. So next is the access to information related to farming. So here in this photo, you can see the participants of the focus group discussion, composed of the Irrigator Association president, the the women's group, and other member of the people's organization. So the information related to farming mostly comes from the agricultural technologies and fellow farmers, television and radio, and the farmer sector claimed that they need to try some modern equipment to lessen the intensive labor requirements in the field. So because it's very intensive, the labor itself, because it's very tedious when you're starting to prepare the land until harvesting and threshing. So the participants believe that with existence of technology, there will be less chance of abandoning the paddies for modern technology makes farming easy. Oh, another thing that is important is the family income because it helps them to become stable and also to support their living and to maintain the rice terraces. It is also the other sources of livelihood includes the vegetable production, and mostly some there is non-agri related source of income like daily wage laborers, driving, being government employees, carpentry, business masonry, overseas work, and tourism. So I've discussed the themes under the socio-cultural dimension, and another dimension is the ecological dimension, which is biodiversity. And there is only one indicator here, the diversity in three species. Um, Earlier I mentioned the penutrue or woodlot and its essential function, and biodiversity is really helpful in as a resilience building strategy in Chaya. So trees are playing important role in the resilience, and it also acts as as watershed and source of timber and organic fertilizer and natural medicine. It also protect them from strong typhoon and provide aesthetics. So for the highlights, all of the determinants of resilience are in agreement with the indicators of resilience previously used in different SEPL, or socio-ecological production landscape, across the globe. Some are biodiversity, cultural traditions, and agro-biodiversification. So in Chaya, the sturdy stone wall and the natural spring stand out. So it's very important as part of resilience building strategies in Chaya. So it can be concluded that the above-mentioned indicators are significantly important in strengthening and building the resilience of a socio-ecological production landscape and should be used for monitoring vulnerabilities in social ecological systems. So for the community development recommendation, since they practice subsistence farming or they use the produce or the rice for home consumption, so the government should intervene by providing sustained financial assistance in pursuing innovations in the rice terraces. So most of them are abandoning their rice terraces, so government should intervene to preserve and conserve our cultural heritage. So another recommendation, it could be in the form of responsible and sustainable ecotourism. I mean here responsible and sustainable because we saw the impact of tourism in Banawe rice terraces. So it should be responsible and sustainable. And there should be rice fish farming for another source of income and vegetable gardening, especially in the areas not irrigated or um, damaged as of this time. And the government should also assist them for farm assurance, among others, but above all, support to practice the age-old rituals freely without pressure. So for the ecological dimension, the tree diversity, the penuchu, and the woodlot, it is suggested that sustainable forest management and protection of watershed should be well implemented to sustain the well-functioning watershed. So for another part of my study, I saw there that in reforestation, they are not using the endemic species there, but they are just using the exotic species. So the tree species there is not endemic anymore. So there is becoming a problem in the forest itself. So the traditional socio-ecological practices deeply rooted in the Fogar rice culture, but currently degenerating, have to be mainstream, especially among the youth, in whatever means. Because we believe that the youth is our hope and they will continue the practices of the current generation. So it's very important to reintroduce or introduce the traditional practices so that the cultural heritage in Chaya or other cultural heritage in Ifugao can be preserved and conserved. So the Chaya local government units should ask the Philippine government through their House representatives for assistance since their Pinuchu ecosystem services go a long way beyond Ifugao. So what we mean here is that uh, the ecosystem services from the Pinuchu in Ifugao go a long way beyond Ifugao because it also helps the lowland areas like in the north and not just the Ifugao system itself, but the services go along beyond Ifugao. We can experience uh, enough water supply here in the north in our lowland lying areas. So this is some of the literature cited, Baginon, the science behind the problem of earthworms, and up to Cabell, an indicator framework for assessing agroecosystem resilience. So here are some publications by myself and my advisor, Dr. Inocencio Buot. So you can see our publications related to Chaya socio-ecological production landscape. You just search in the researchgate.net or Google. So I would like to acknowledge the funding from the Department of Science and Technology through DOST, ASTHRDP, and Southeast Asian Regional Center for Graduate Study, the JICA Ifugao Satoyama Master Program, and the assistance of the Mayuya Ifugao Local Government Unit and the indigenous people of China. So this is the end of my presentation, and I hope that I can share some information to all of you. Thank you very much.
All right. Maraming salamat, Ms. Santiago. Thank you very much for sharing with us a holistic approach to conservation, and by doing so, cover the various or the multi-sector determinants of resilience. No? Thank you very much for that. So this is something that's very much sought after by all heritage workers and of course all students of heritage, no? May it be professional or aficionado. Yeah. Okay. I would like to say also that your discussion, um, although, as it is very helpful, no, or as it is very important for heritage in general, is also most important for two particular courses that we are offering now in UP Manila, now related to the BA Philippine Arts program. So currently we are offering two courses. That's Philippine Arts 151, which is Cultural Heritage Preservation, and Philippine Arts 144, which is Community Development in the Arts. So both courses, as you would see, would find your the topic of today's conversation highly important and most useful. So once again, thank you very much, Ms. Santiago, for a very enlightening discussion. So can we proceed now to the question and answer? Can I call on Charisse to preside the question and answer portion? Okay, before Charisse does so, I would like to also that this section also is also open to the response from or representative from the Chaya region, from Chaya Ifugao, Miss Cleo Ann Ayon. So please feel free to So yeah, my connection got lost momentarily, but I was about to say that that our two guests, please feel free to respond as well during the question and answer portion. So
Hello. Okay, hello. If you have any questions or clarifications for Ma'am Santiago, feel free to send them here on the chat. Yes, Sir Romeo, do you have anything to say? Hello, sorry. Sir, I think you're muted, or I can't hear you po.
Hello, hello,
Yes,
hello.
sir, I hear you now po. We hear you now. Hello, sir.
Hello, Ma'am Clarice.
Yes po. I hear you now.
So I was called na. Okay. Very much. So I'm Romeo Gomez from Benguet State University. I have actually worked with the Satoyama ISMTP with Dr. Buot. I'll just raise 3 points regarding the presentation. But first, let me thank Jhoanna for the contribution to growing out the Ifugao rice terraces and the socio-ecological production landscapes. Okay, the first point that I'd like to comment on would be on the ecological dimensions that you mentioned. Since this is some kind of a measurement of sustainability and resiliency, aside from biodiversity, perhaps it's also nice to look at, for instance, soil fertility and productivity, because that is the one that actually maintains, the flow of ecological functions in terms of good yield, good quality. Okay, that's soil fertility and productivity. So it talks about rice terraces as nutrient traps, that kind of dynamics. Now the second point, perhaps this is a question. Have you encountered any explanation or discussion about migration and market economy? Because holistically, migration and market economy would have actually impinged on the resiliency of the ecosystem because of movement out of Ifugao, and therefore abandonment of the terraces would ensue. Just last point, in your recommendation, you mentioned about assistance or asking assistance from the government. But perhaps it's nice to point out what specifically these recommendations are and what dimension should it address. Thank you very much. Nakamute na.
You may unmute yourself, Santiago. Okay.
Okay po. Thank you po, Sir Romeo, for the comments and suggestions. For the for the indicator po under the ecological dimension, thank you for including the soil fertility. Maybe I think I should include it when I am going to pursue my PhD and include it in the ecological dimension. For the migration, the people there mentioned that they are migrating because the employment, there's no parang employment po na mas malaki yung kita. So they are going outside, but the advantage of migration for them, they have another source of income and they use that income to improve their rice terraces, especially when there are damages. And I think for the last question of the government assistance, since my study has 4 objectives, I I discuss it in the last objective part. The government assistance should focus on the financial dimension or the family income because it has the lowest score in the resilience assessment. So I think there is a need to improve the livelihood in the socio-ecological system in Chaya, the tourism, the improvement of marketing, adding value in the rice terraces. Yun po yung mga isa sa mga na-encounter ko po.
Thank you so much. Ma'am, we have another question po sent to me privately through Zoom. So have there been instances of commercial entities or mining companies that tried to intrude on the Ifugao people's land? If so, how did the community respond? How did the local government units help them address these issues?
So in Ifugao, in Mayuyao, when I studied there, when I conducted my study, there is no mining company including the area. Kasi they preserve the culture. Even even yung Jollibee, they don't allow it to enter.
Okay, thank you. Ma'am, we have another question. So, regarding the transmission of indigenous knowledge and practices, are the Ifugao rituals and practices part of the students' education system?
They include it in the my recommendation is to include it in the curriculum, but there is a school of living tradition there which offers help in the transmission of the indigenous knowledge.
Okay po. Another question po. In your personal opinion, what are some examples of mainstreaming the Ifugao rice culture among the youth? Except for what you mentioned po, included in the curriculum.
Okay. So, yun. My recommendation is to include it in the curriculum from elementary to college. And also in mainstreaming, we need to use the social media para mas ma-engage sila, highly engage. And also to practice yung mga practices, mga traditional practices during the event, yung na-mention ko na festival nila, ganun. And in mainstreaming also, it needs to start sa family itself pa lamang. And the community or the local government units pa rin is to support yung mga practices na yun na hindi na to avoid yung loss of knowledge.
Okay, so we have another question. With urbanization comes homogenization of culture. How do you think preservation of culture compete with the lure of economic gains brought about by urbanization and urban lifestyles, especially with the youth?
So for this, based on the interview, the youth is more engaged in other industry, not agriculture. Wait lang po. Wait lang po.
Okay. While waiting for our speaker, I would like to acknowledge Cherise Del Castillo, a student in both of my Philippine Arts 144 and 151 to be instrumental in making this webinar possible, primarily because of her strong internet connection. Yeah, so I just let everyone know now that I share with everyone the problem with connectivity. And in fact, I lost my connection twice already during this particular activity. And for this reason, I had to make, so this is the secret behind that problem. So I share this with everyone. You just have to look for a co-host who can make the internet space, your Zoom space stable. And for this particular activity, we have this in the person of Cherise Del Castillo. So thank you very much, Cherise. So yes, so our speaker is back. Yes, Miss Santiago, thank you.
Pasensya na po. Ito. Tama po to yung chat ni Sir Romeo. In Ifugao, Indigenous people's education also provides opportunity to integrate culture and tradition. So there, I remember po there is a Ifugao Satoyama Master training program, and they are training the people there in Mayuyao and other areas in Ifugao. So thank you po, Sir Romeo, for reminding me. And for your question, with urbanization comes homogenization of culture. How do you think? So at present, it is competing with the youth. Miss Cleo, are you there? So before, during the focus group discussion, they are more into industrial technology, and instead of helping in the field, they just want to use social media, Facebook. And this is from the part of the youth. So it is really affecting the lifestyle. But we know that there should be a balance in the system. We should preserve the culture, but at the same time, we should also have economic sources. Parang we should improve the economic activity. But my comment here is that there should be balance in economy and culture.
Okay, thank you po. Are there more questions? Your Ma'am Santiago? last call. Yes, Sir Romeo. Sir, I think you're muted. Yeah.
Hello, I'm okay. Thank you again. One of the big issues would be the tourism history in Banaue and has actually caused a lot of cultural and environmental degradation. Now, if the national government says that they will go for the policy on ecotourism, and Mayoyaw might be one of the recipients. But what safeguards, based on the discussions that you had with the respondents, what would you think the safeguards should be so that it will not duplicate the bad experience of Banawe having undergone cultural and environmental degradation when tourists would now start flocking the area, changing culture and societal interactions? How do you look at that?
Okay po. So I've think about that before, and I had a discussion with Vice Mayor Jimmy before. So their recommendation is to have a localized strategy in the ecotourism po. Like when it comes to the business, parang the government should help the local people. The business should be managed by the local people. The lodging areas should be managed by the indigenous people po. And they have this kind of land use planning po para hindi po makagaya po sa Banawe. Yun po yung isa sa mga recommendations po ni na Vice Mayor before.
Thank you so much, Sir Romeo and Ma'am Joanna. Is there anyone else who wants to share or ask a question? Okay, okay na po.
If I may share some
Yes.
insights.
Yes.
Well, ang importante kasi na tinitingnan natin, particularly so when we talk about, preserving and protecting our both biodiversity and cultural identity and diversity, is to really the project should not really mainstreaming. The project should be asserting the indigenous knowledge systems and practices. You know what for example, doon sa Japan, sila yung pinupuntahan para pag-aralan or maranasan yung kanilang Satuyama. No? So ibig sabihin, if the people themselves are resilient, we're talking about resilience or cultural resilience, I really want talagang project nila yon, or it's already embedded in the culture. It's just a transferring, the knowledge systems from one generation to the other, maintaining it and protecting them from the entrance or from the pool or the yung tinatawag natin hegemonizing effect of outside culture. Alam na natin yan, no? Culture from the outside, meaning kasi ang ating education system in itself is not indigenous, di ba? Western derived. So it negates, no? It runs counter to our indigenous knowledge systems and practices. So mahalaga sana yung ating mga institutions, for example, Ifugao State University, that should be a good project. Ang isang critic ko dyan, yung pang JICA, ang nakaisip na para i-advocate yung notion ng humans in harmony with nature na concept. O yan ba, yung minuyungan concept dyan o traditions dyan, at saka yung payo at yung nabanggit kanina nung pag-maintain mo ng woodlot, etc. Eh dapat nasusustain. So kasi ang lakas ng hatak ng Western culture, alam natin na hegemonizing niya eh. Di ba? Gusto niyang kontrolin. Gusto niyang kontrolin yung, lalo na yung consciousness, kamalayan, at saka pag kinontrol mo yung consciousness kasi everything else follows eh. Di ba? Like tayo, katulad natin, I was, dapat sana, for example, the cultural richness of the Mayaw-Yaw, culture should be highlighted. Doon iikot. So dapat yung kung meron kang ecotourism, yun ang dadayuhin, di ba? Dadayo yung. So dapat so kung halimbawa, yung cuisine, yung ritual, yung ritual na pwedeng panuorin ng kasi may mga ritual na sagrado hindi mo pini-perform yan para sa turismo, di ba? Pini-perform mo yan dahil, di ba? Sa mga anito, gusto mo silang yung pagiging sagrado ng activity before planting. Kaya sabi niya may mga rituals na ginagawa para i-sustain yung practices na pagdating doon sa Mayaw-Yaw, no? Cultural practices in preserving their, for example, rice terraces and woodlots, etc. So yun yung challenge noon. Challenge sa atin. Kasi marami tayong dapat tanggalin. Kasi alam mo yun, yung monopolizing, hegemonizing effect of education. Na pag-uwi, halimbawa, agricultural lang mismo, dapat sana tignan ano mga gandang agricultural rituals and practices na dapat i-preserve at paano yan nasusustain yung mention yung soil fertility, etc. No? Kung earthworm yung nagsusustain ng fertility ng soil, katulad din halimbawa ng sinabi niyang paggamit ng sunflower leaves, di ba? Yung technology nun, kung paano ba pinoproseso yung technology na yan at paano ba nila ini-enrich, paano nila napapalusog yung mga earthworm para ma-maintain yung organic fertilizer yung gamit, magandang makita yan ng tigalabas. So that will invite those people, ecotourism for example, that will invite people to look at those traditions and iugnayan even the way the people behave, the cultural norms and values, nagre-reflect yan ecosystem, ecological, at saka yung tinatawag na behavioral systems interact because from the perspective of, for example, yung tinatawag natin survival. So, kasi nakakreate ka na ng disimbalance doon sa nature and humans interacting, may disimbalance, hindi na niya masusustain. The forest ecosystem itself probably will no longer be able to sustain the human habitat. So paano mo ibabalik yung ganong balance? Kasi socio-ecological lang perspective, dapat doon ka tumingin. Paano mo babalik yung balance? Bakit may disimbalance? Bakit kailangan mo i-infuse yung community development? Kailangan mo bang i-infuse yung community development? O andyan yung community development na indigenous yung form, pero hindi natin yun ang pinapalabas. Pinapalabas natin yung natutunan natin sa universidad na Western derived. Hindi yung community organizing, community development knowledge na nandoon sa community mismo na dapat sana may strengthen. Of course, the outsiders, researchers as us, can provide probably useful critique. But again, buhay nila yun eh. No? At meron tayong mga existing na mga batas para ma-preserve and ma-protect yan. Yung IPRA mismo, the Indigenous People's Rights Act already provided the mechanisms as far as the state laws are concerned to help and protect, preserve biological and cultural diversity. Ang kailangan lang i-challenge yung NCIP na mas maging facilitative para ma-strengthen yan. I-assert din nila yung kanilang power na embedded sa kanila kasi hindi nila ina-assert eh. Diba? Na ma-minoritize yung NCIP. Samantalang empowered siya ng isang batas para tumulong na i-preserve yung kultura, yung self-determination, self-governance, cultural identity at preservation ng mga indigenous people. So I think dapat we should advocate that. Kailangan ng strong advocacy. Or even sa indigenous people's education, malinaw na dapat ang nilagay mo doon IP curriculum. Ang IP curriculum mo, hindi siya uniform. Halimbawa, kung sa Ifugao State University, gagawa sila ng IP education curriculum, dapat lahat ng mga nandoon ng mga cultural practices, indigenous knowledge system and practices na nasa Ifugao, ang ilagay nila sa curriculum muna. And then probably add on other, probably kung parehong parallel to, for example, the Benguet or Mountain Province or the whole of Cordillera, yun ang dapat na mabigyan ng premium. And then, pagdating halimbawa sa pag-celebrate ng mga festivals, sa Japan, dinadayo yung pag-celebrate ng mga festivals. So nakaka-create talaga ng income locally. Dinadayo. Dahil authentic yung pag-practice nila. Hindi ka mag-create ang nangyari kasi ngayon, nag-create ka ng panagbenga. Di naman yan authentic. At sino ang nananalo dyan? Yung mga nako-commercialize. Diba? Pero kung halimbawa may ritual na ginagawa every August, every July na ginagawa ng mga tao doon at sineselebrate lang sa panahon na yon. Diba? Hindi. Nahulog tayo sa bitag na gawin mo yung komersyalisado yung ritual or festival. Na dapat hindi. Kasi in that sense, na di-indigenize, nawalan ng substance yung indigenous knowledge systems and practices. So I think that should be, we should reflect on that, no, as part of our criticism, self-criticism. Particularly tayo na-engage sa ganitong tipo ng advocacy. Maging cautious, careful tayo at analytical sa ganung even in terms of our laying out some policies and programs, no, sa ating i-challenge natin yung gobyerno. Punduhan niya yung NCIP. At kung mayroong NCIP na lokal, na doon mismo may NCIP doon sa munisipyo, yun ang challenge na. Kasi siya na yung sangay ng gobyerno na dapat magpatupad niyan. And then kasama kung mayroong municipal development plan tungkol diyan o barangay development plan, mayroong kang systems and structures na pwede mong punduhan. May fiscal provision diyan at yan ang i-assert. Yun lang yung aking insight at reflection dito sa ating session ngayong umaga. Thank you.
Okay. I'm afraid we don't have any more time for another question, unless our speaker would like to respond to the last comment of our Dean, of Dean Nastasio.
Napakaganda po nung insights ni Dean. And totoo po na dapat talaga mag-focus po tayo sa strengthening ng ating mismong indigenous people before po yung pag-enter pa ng outsider. So, I think the IPRA law should be talagang ma-implement po. Hindi lang po sa Ifugao, kundi sa other indigenous people natin. Kasi parang hindi po din siya na-implement masyado. So, the policymaker should look into this po sa implementation. So, maganda po yung insights ni Dean and maganda rin po na maiayos po yung curriculum natin, especially in Ifugao, with the help of the universities din po and our DepEd din po. So, yun po siya. So, maganda po na mai-study ko po ulit siya kapag po ay pursue other graduate higher studies po. Thank you po, Dean.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Santiago. And yes, it was, we are fortunate that our last comment came from Dean Astacio, and wherein he highlighted the fact that the most, or that the best approach to community development is to uncover indigenous knowledge of doing so. No? So if you can uncover their indigenous system of managing culture, which most likely would be simply basically in terms of their actual practice, no, of heritage, no, like no marketing tool can exceed or can excel or can be better than the actual practice of traditional heritage or of the heritage of the people. No? So, and if this is and the fact that this is acknowledged and viewed by others, then this would in itself would be the best marketing tool. No? And on the other hand, I also recall an earlier suggestion, no, of Ms. Santiago, no, when the question on how engagement with the youth can be best carried out. And among the many things that she suggested, she did mention the use of social media. No? So I just wanted to note the fact that this particular approach, not to engaging with the youth, is something which clearly is not withheld or clearly is not impeded by the pandemic. No? And this is something which we are, it is a tool which we are actually pushing our students and cultural heritage to do. No? So in terms of promoting it, no? So digital media, no? Online promotion is something which definitely transcend our present circumstance now. No? We're speaking of the era of pandemic. But so once again, thank you very much for our speaker today, Ms. Jhoanna Santiago, for the very enlightening talk. And thank you for all who responded. Yes, thank you too for all who responded to Ms. Santiago, for all your questions, and of course all the things which you shared, no? Because our participants did not only ask questions, no? But they also shared with us, no? Important uh, points related to cultural heritage and its management. Of course, conservation and management as a whole. So with that, Charisse, since you have better audio, can we proceed with the certificates? Yes.
Okay po. So before we present the certificate of appreciation, we would like to say that we are giving the certificate with a small token of appreciation, which we shall be sending through delivery to Miss Santiago.
Thank you.
So now I will present the certificate. Okay, is it seen na po?
Yes, Charisse.
Okay. Okay. So BA Philippine Arts, Cultural Heritage and Arts Management Program, the Department of Arts and Communication, and the College of Arts and Sciences, University of the Philippines, Manila, presents the Certificate of Appreciation to Jhoanna O. Santiago for speaking on community development through heritage and social-ecological conservation, the case of Chaya Rice Terraces in Mayoyaw, Ifugao, given this 26th day of September 2020 during the UP Manila PhilArts webinar planned by Dr. Honey Libertine Afanzar Labor, PhilArts Webinar Series Convener, Professor Alice Adeva, Chair of Department of Arts and Communication, CAS CP Manila, and of course, Dr. Leonardo Stasio Jr., the Dean of College of Arts and Sciences, CP Manila. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you po.
So right now, before we end this, can I request lang if it's okay if you turn on our camera so that we can take a picture? Yes. Thank you, thank you. I will wait for more people to turn on their cameras. Okay. I will wait. Is anyone else want to join the picture? Turn on your camera. Ma'am, we'll take the picture na po. You can turn on your camera then. Okay. Sige. Let's take our picture. Oh, we have 2 pages, so keep smiling na lang po. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for you took the picture. Is there anything else what you want to say, Ma'am Naboy, before we end this?
Okay. Well, I guess all I can say is that thank you, everyone, for your participation. Of course, thank you to our